Welcome to Washington in Focus. I'm your host, Spencer Pauley, the Western Washington reporter for the Center Square. And with me today is investigative reporter TJ Martinell. Today we're talking about his recent story regarding the Washington Attorney General's office supporting a private law firm that has filed a lawsuit in response to executive orders from President Donald Trump. But TJ, you uncovered some major details about Brown's relationship with this law firm that is leading to some legal violation complaints. So let's just get right into this. Tell us what you learned.
Right. So as you mentioned, Perkins Coie filed a lawsuit. They sought a temporary restraining order against President Trump's executive orders regarding their security clearance and federal contracts that the law firm has with them. Our state attorney general, Nick Brown, filed an amicus brief, which is effectively a friend of the court brief to the judge, saying that Perkins Coie's case was important for them to get involved with, along with 20 other state attorney generals. And though they mentioned in the amicus brief that they had occasionally had Perkins Coie suing the state, what they failed to mention is that they have an active contract with Perkins Coie right now that is set to expire in September to provide legal services to Washington State University, which is a client of the Attorney General's office. Now, why that's relevant is the contract makes Perkins Coie special attorney generals, and by that, an extension of the Attorney General's office. So, in effect, Nick Brown was filing an amicus brief in support of his own office.
So a state attorney general filing amicus brief in support of, a private law firm like this seems unprecedented. Would you say that's true?
Well, it's also unprecedented in that they filed an amicus brief in support of a private law firm like this regarding a temporary restraining order. According to one of my sources, the only time this has happened in recent memory was concerning illegal immigrants, children being caged or kept separate from families, I believe is what happened. So it was unusual and unprecedented for them to get involved in the first place. Now, to be fair, it's not illegal for them to do so, but the problem is that they failed to disclose that they have a conflict of interest in getting involved in this case, so they're not a neutral party.
Right. And, so the Attorney General's office has contracted with this law firm. Do you know how much they've paid in legal fees already?
I'm trying to figure that out. I filed public records requests. I mean, we know it's in the thousands. Like they bill. This is not just one of the most largest private law firms in the country. It also they charge a premium for their services. They're a very prestigious law firm in that sense. So they're not charging minimum wage per hour on this stuff. So we don't know. We also don't know. Here's a couple things we don't know. We don't know how many other, if any, active contracts that the Attorney General's office has with Perkins Coie right now. We don't know how many contracts they've had in the past. We also don't know if they had any contracts with them at the time that law firm was also suing the state, in which the Attorney General's office would be representing. But here's the irony of the amicus brief arguments is that Nick Brown was saying that just because Perkins Coie had previously represented Hillary Clinton, they were involved in the Russian dossier incident that's been since disproven, and the idea that they're basically opposing this notion that the federal government can terminate contracts with a law firm, so a client can no longer. They're saying that the client has to accept an attorney. Well, here's the irony of that. In the contract signed between the Attorney General's office and Perkins Coie, the Attorney General's office can terminate the contract under any circumstances and for whatever reason, as long as they give them a 15-day notice. On top of that, Perkins Coie also has to notify the Attorney General's office if they plan or intend to represent a client whose interests are adverse to the state.
And they haven't considered any of this.
I'll say it again.
They haven't considered any of that. They haven't considered terminating this contract just because of this, or
no. But that provision is the very thing that they're going after President Trump over. They're going after President Trump because he doesn't. They're saying he has to give better reasons than the reasons he's giving for not continuing the contract with them. So that's the issue that's going on. And the other issue that's going on is that Perkins Coie has to notify the Attorney General's office if they're plan to represent a client whose interests are adverse to that of the states. in effect, what that's saying is, hey, don't represent people we don't want you representing, or we could potentially terminate your contract. Mm-hmm. And so the question is, how many other contracts do they have where the same stipulations apply?
That is definitely something that, you think of when you see all these details in the story. Now, you went in your story, you also talked to former King County Deputy Prosecutor Bob Scales. Now, what did he tell you about, Trump's orders and this whole entire, situation?
Right. So for my first story that I wrote about this, he said that there's no legal basis for them to oppose him terminating contracts. Like, this is kind of the most basic fundamental right of a client to no longer work with an attorney because you don't think that they're representing your best interests. And it's kind of bizarre for them to say, hey, this law firm that represented your political opponent, you have to have them represent you as a client, and you don't have a right not to seek legal representation elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So he just said there's no legal or constitutional basis for it. And it's, he's got his own opinions on as to what's going on. But I mean, what's from a taxpayer perspective, what's effectively going on is that the Attorney General's office is using public taxpayer dollars to help protect the federal contracts of a private law firm that it has a contract with at the same time.
That's something I thought about too when I was reading your story. It's like we're having state tax dollars being used to suit federal tax dollars. And, TJ, this is what we do. We cover taxpayer focused stories. So I'm always thinking about like that kind of aspect of it. But when you see it on paper here, it's like tax dollars being used for this, it can grow some frustrations. Now, TJ, did you reach out to the Attorney General's office about all of this, especially when you found out this new information?
Yeah, I reached out to them and they got back to me and said that it was not illegal or against anything for them to file an amicus brief. That's part of what they're allowed to do. Regarding the contract that they had with Perkins Coie and the failure to disclose it, they were as silent as the Red October.
Okay, so what's next, TJ? What's next in this process here?
Well, there's been an ethical and legal complaint filed at the state and federal level over this. And so I've reached out to some sources. I actually reached out to the U.S. Attorney General's office for the District of Columbia, which is where the lawsuit was filed, the temporary restraining order. And I didn't hear back from them. I'm not sure what's going on there, but I've reached out to other sources. So this is a developing story. So this is, believe you me, it ain't over yet.
I bet. Yeah. Well, I think with all of what's going on here, but can we just go back real quick? Because all of this was the law firm Perkins Coie. They filed a lawsuit against Trump regarding one of his executive orders. Now, I'm not sure if we touched on it, but can you tell me which executive order it is? Just because he has, issued so many. Which one was it here? Do you recall?
I don't recall the exact executive orders. I just know that there were several, and they're also accusing Trump of defamatory remarks, which Bob Scales has told me doesn't make any sense because the president has immunity from that kind of thing. So the president can say kind of whatever he wants. And so that's kind of what's going on right now. I mean, there's the temporary restraining order has been imposed, but the lawsuit is still ongoing.
Always complex with these lawsuits. Well, TJ, I know you've been keeping a close eye on these upcoming events. So thanks for briefing us on the story. And that's all for this episode of Washington Focus. I'm Spencer Pauly. Thanks for listening.